Welcome to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.
Welcome to another episode of Slackin' Off. I'm your host, Brady Slack. And last time, this is going to be a double whammy. And Sharon is our guest today, Sharon Tasman. I'll give a little introduction about her in just 1 second. But last time we talked a little bit about law. And this time I think we're going to get a little different perspective about law. And I'm excited to have Sharon on our podcast today. Sharon comes to us with a lot of different experience. She has participated in large corporate law. She now owns her own kind of boutique law firm. And she's had quite the entrepreneurial journey that I think we're going to be excited to hear about today. So without further ado, Sharon Tasman, thank you for being on the Slackin' Off podcast today.
Brady, thank you for having me. I am very happy to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. So I first kind of want to dive in just a little bit about your background. Obviously, you're a business and technology attorney, but I wanted I always like to know the backstory because I got tripped and pushed into accounting. I never thought I'd wanted to be a tax accountant. Like that doesn't sound inherently fun. But why law? What made you want to go into being an attorney and into practicing law?
So I have to tell you, I never planned to be a lawyer. I'm not one of those people who was born to be a lawyer. I kind of went in kicking and screaming. My mother started computer programming in the 1950s. She was like one of those hidden figures.
That's like pioneer status.
Really pioneer status. The computer she used is in one of the Smithsonian museums. The rocket she programmed for is in Air and Space. And in fact, you actually can see a sliver of it in Wonder Woman 1984. So I'm like, yeah, go Mom. She taught my brother. They taught me when I was 12. So I was all set down the programming route, went to engineering school, worked for GE as a programmer and a trainer, computer trainer, went to MCI and went, I can do it. I'm good at it, but it didn't make me go, wow. Okay. Along the way, I had taken a couple law classes related to business law. And I went, well, they made sense. They were easy A's. They were logical. I don't really want to be a programmer full time anymore. Maybe I'll go to law school. So I asked one of those professors for a recommendation. And she said, I always knew you'd be a lawyer. I just thought you were fighting it. So I'm like, And then my mom said, I think you'll be a great lawyer. I despise lawyers, but I think you'll be a great one. And I'm like, thank you, Mom, I think. Yeah. But really what I love is what I do now truly is a blend of everything I've ever done. So I do business law and technology law, and I do life sciences law. And, I know what I know. I know what I do. We don't do anything else. Yeah. I don't, the of counsel that work with me, we just don't. So when you're doing deals, whether it's helping startups get into making sure they have the right legal protections, or with some of my larger corporate clients, when you're doing deals, you have to understand not just the business, but the science and technology behind it, because knowing those pieces helps you understand the business and the legal parts that have to go into them. So I think that that's what we bring in our law firm, and myself as well, that's different. We all come from backgrounds of working for NIH, or I was a programmer. So we have the science pieces as well as the law pieces, and it also makes us better business lawyers at the same time.
So the first rabbit hole I kind of want to go down is actually more geared to maybe your mom and you.
Sure.
From what it sounds like, both very experienced and powerful women in the workforce. Tell me a little bit about that. What difficulties do you think your mom confronted, and how did that help you in your entrepreneurial journey?
So, my mom started programming when because she graduated college early. She was 21.
Wow.
And she worked as first a substitute math teacher, and then she worked as a programmer for Bell Labs at Columbia University. And in the end, she actually ended up managing the installation, which was not her intent either. But there were very few women there. The women that were there were all secretaries, but she knew what she knew. And the one thing that it helped me was I grew up being told I could do whatever I wanted. I had, for lack of a better word, a gender neutral upbringing. My dad was in construction and real estate. My mom was in programming. So I started programming when I was 12. I didn't have a choice, they taught me when I was 12. My brother would drag me to high school with him. He was a few years older than me. So I was like hanging out in the computer room. When I started high school, I was the only girl and the only freshman in the computer classes. But I had dolls, but I also had a hard hat, hammer, and talked about programming. So I grew up a little bit fearless and a little bit type A, maybe, just a little bit.
That's okay. Admit
Yeah,
it.
I admit it. I own it. I'm type A. My fiance is type B. We work well together.
Yeah.
Two type A's. Yeah. But I saw, the business side from my dad, the technical side from my mom. And I really believe in the science side that Mendel, the biologist, would be proud, because I have the business from my dad, the tech from my mom. I have my mom's foreign language skills, my dad's spatial perception skills and like driving skills. And it's really good that I don't have the reverse, because my mom would get lost driving around a box and my dad spoke English. So it just made me a little bit fearless.
Mm-hmm.
I also saw what it was like to be a woman bullied in the workplace. I would talk about that with her. With my dad, I talk about negotiation. So it really gave me a rounded and a grounded experience. It still doesn't change the fact that when, as a woman, you go into more of a man's field, science, programming, law, you still face sexism and the feeling that you have to be better, stronger, faster to get to the same place. And that's in part why, yes, I have larger clients, but I also really am passionate about helping women who want to make the leap from employee to employer to make that leap, especially women over the age of 40, because I didn't start my first business till I was over 40. And, my tagline a little bit is age is an asset. And I really do believe that. It's a different perspective as well. So, my mom, when I was getting cognizant of these things, was in her 40s, and she had stopped for a while working to raise my brother and I when we were younger, but then she went back into the workforce later. And this is a true story. I had worked for MCI and I told them I was leaving. And they said, but we need somebody else. Do you know anybody who could do this kind of programming? And I said, yes, my mother. So, no joke, when I left MCI, my mom took my spot.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so she had been out of the workforce for a while and then went back. And, so I got to see her make the leap from like different style computers to modern computers. And she was great at it. And that was really, really cool. But she got to see all different generations of workforce. And it meant that I got to see it because we would talk what it was like.
Yeah.
So it was really cool.
So you talked to, and I don't want to go too far into this, but I always use these opportunities for even myself to get a little bit better understanding of what's going on around me. And we talked a little bit about age. We talked a little bit about sex. And I think our socioeconomic climate allows us to understand the difficulties that other people are going through. Do you feel like as a society we've progressed in the conversation of making sure that there's more equality, or do you feel like there's any difference?
I think we have progressed. The pay disparity, for example, is lower than it used to be.
Yeah.
But honestly, there is still the issue of there are more people in senior leadership roles in companies that are not women or members of the BIPOC community than are. And there is a little bit of, I think it's two factors. There's a little bit of people like to do business with people they're familiar with and get to know better. And there is a little bit of the golf course going to watch the sporting events. I mean, my dad actually gave me a love of football and sports. So that actually, I'm okay with that. But the other thing is that as a society, still women are often expected to play nice, to be the good girl, expected to be the conciliators. And also, I think women internalize we shouldn't, we don't want to play too rough, because if you play too rough, then instead of be considered assertive in a positive way, we're labeled assertive or some other names in a negative way. And it does present a little bit of a dichotomy. I often find with women who want to start their own business, and 49% of all businesses started in the last couple of years were started by women. And of those, 62% were started by women over the age of 40. So it really is
Really?
a group. Well, but if you think about it, women over 40, they've been in the workplace longer. They've often built up resources. They've built knowledge bases that enable
Yeah.
them to move, I think, more easily into starting up a business necessarily than 20 or 30 somethings. Not that 20 or 30 somethings can't, but it's also a different perspective, different issues that they have to face, lack of knowledge versus dealing with, for example, aging parents and children all at the same time.
Yeah.
But I do think, and I see it a lot, that women don't necessarily apply for the posts or reach for the prospective client or charge as much as a man would, even if they have the same experience. And there was a study that showed that, and this is nothing against men, I think men are wonderful, I'm marrying one, right? That men will apply for a job or go for the promotion if they're somewhere 50 or 60% qualified for the position.
Yep.
Women wait till they're 80 or 90% qualified. And they don't, in part of the reason women make less is they don't ask for the promotion, or if they ask for the promotion, they're not perceived as serious, because the skills that we bring, we may not phrase them in the right way or the same way that a man will. We don't want to boast. We don't want to brag. We don't want to be labeled the B word. And part of it is saying, but if you're a consultant and you've got all these amazing tools that you've developed, why aren't you charging them? Because that's part of your worth. And they go, but I'm reusing them. I'm like, but if you didn't reuse them, if you had to create them new for a client, how much would it actually cost them? And then they'll come back with an answer in the thousands of dollars. And my reaction is, why aren't you charging that?
Yeah.
Because we feel like we need to apologize for asking for money. No, you just need to do it the right way. And I think what people don't realize is that, especially in the beginning, contracts and law are actually, no matter whether you're a man, a woman, white, BIPOC, it doesn't matter. Contracts are actually a small business best friend.
Yeah.
They make you look more professional, are more professional. They protect your intellectual property. They help you get paid. They help you get out if you're not getting paid. They help prevent scope creep. They help prevent lawsuits over misunderstanding. So that's the other thing I'm really trying to do is, besides empower women, is help small businesses understand that legal doesn't have to be scary, right? You don't have to be super rich or a big company to have lawyers, and you shouldn't be afraid of law.
So why? Okay, let's transition into that, because I think that poses a really good question. Why do you think lawyers are scary?
Well, I do think the profession generally has a bad reputation at times because often the bad actors are the ones getting all the press. The self-aggrandizing, ambulance chasing, perhaps not the most honest, see them in the newspapers. We won't name lawyers, delving into politics.
Yeah.
Those are the lawyers people see, right? Or often it may be the first introduction somebody has is somebody they know got sued because of X or Y. Whether it was a valid lawsuit, they don't always have that positive perspective of law. Or in business, even if they know law makes a difference, they don't think law is affordable, because you hear about the astronomical rates and how am I going to get this done? So either they just don't want to deal with it, or they figure I'll just deal with it later. I'm either nervous now, or I can't possibly afford it now, or it doesn't really matter. And that's what I'm trying to disabuse people of, the notion of whether it's hiring me or somebody else, hire somebody. That's at the beginning.
As it relates to taxes, to your point, I think a lot of people just don't understand how they work and how to implement them effectively in what they're doing or their financial plan. And so because they don't understand it, they typically put it off. And when they put it off, it ends up costing them more money in the long run, which also kind of feeds that negative connotation or idea that they have about taxes. And I think I've worked with quite a few different attorneys, and it sounds like it's very similar. Lots of people just don't know how to work with an attorney. They don't know what the actual fees are. They don't know why they would need an attorney. And so because they don't know, that lack of knowledge leads to the fear. And so then they continue to put it off. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but that's,
I do. And also there's a lot of, well, I can just download something off the internet. I'm like,
yeah,
we'll ignore for the moment that downloading somebody else's form off the internet is copyright infringement. But things may look like they're the right contract online.
yeah,
But so if you're a consultant, a client agreement, the first page is going to look pretty much the same. But a client agreement written by a client is never going to be in favor of a client written by for a consultant.
yeah.
But they're going to look similar except for a couple sentences, potentially, or a couple phrases or a couple areas. I mean, some of them may be wildly different, but it's really easy to slide in language that's really bad. For example, if you're a service provider. Now, one
Yeah.
of the worst things you can say is that as a service provider, I'll perform services until the client is reasonably satisfied. Well, that
What
sounds
does that
reasonable.
what does that mean?
Well, what it mean? Well, right. What does it mean? What it legally means is you have agreed to reperform your services
Yep.
until the client says, "I'm done."
Sounds good.
And if that contract was like a fixed fee contract, you've agreed to endless free reperformance of services. And
Yeah.
I have had people come to me after the fact, they didn't work with me, where the client ended up asking for $50,000 worth of free reperformance of services on a $25,000 contract. And they want to know how they get out of it. And I read the contract and my answer is, you can't.
Good luck. Yeah.
Good luck, right? Or I'll get people on TikTok coming to me going, how do I get out of my Verizon contract? I'm like, well, if you signed it without trying to amend anything, good luck.
Yeah.
And also, Verizon retail contracts are some of the most notoriously strict contracts to get out of anyway.
So how did you have a lot of corporate law experience. And I think, again, kind of the dichotomy of law and accounting is, in accounting, a lot of schools, if you go to a really good accounting school, they try and push you into like a Big Four accounting firm, a Deloitte, a PricewaterhouseCoopers, something like that. And in law, a lot of prestigious lawyers come from very large national firms, and you happen to have quite a little bit of experience in a national law firm setting. Tell me a little bit about that. I love the dichotomy of big corporate versus small boutique, right?
So I spent 15 years at one of the top 10 law firms in the world, size-wise, and it was incredible training. You don't really learn how to be a lawyer in law school. You learn how to learn how to be a lawyer in law school. How you actually become a lawyer is when you are spending the 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week.
Yeah.
Honestly, start that number at 60.
All
60,
billable.
70. Not all billable. That's just it.
Dang it.
It's only billable if it's directly chargeable to a client, but all that background research, all the learning, all the non-billable, all the admin does not count. Does not count to your 2,000, 2,200, 2,400 minimum billable hours. You can do it for a while. After a while, it gets really exhausting.
Yeah.
But the type of work you get in there is incredible experience. You learn with different attorneys, different partners. I worked, sometimes I'd be supporting 10 or 20 different partners because what I did was specialized even back then, right? I was technology, IP, life sciences, deals, transactions. It was specialized even then. But I had, you have all of the other specialties around you, and I would be doing, for example, often parts of really big deals. So I've worked on, more than $6 billion worth of deals. Some of them, I was the lead attorney and it might have been smaller. Some of them, I was part of a team and I was the only tech attorney. Sometimes I did contracts that were 10 million. Sometimes I did contracts that were a billion. But you just learn this incredible amount of knowledge. You learn about politics. You learn about gender politics. You learn about a lot of politics. But rates get progressively higher and higher as you advance. And the clients you have to work for become larger and larger over time, or you become more and more of a strategic missile. You go in, you do the deal, you're out. And one of the things that I found from the beginning of working there was I loved working with smaller clients, relatively speaking, right?
Yeah.
Where I would be able to get to know a lot of the people. I would be able to get to know the companies and be able to help head off problems at the pass because I would see them coming before they happened. I could train clients on how to recognize potential issues, like how to avoid getting into copyright infringement situations, making sure they had the right contracts as they were going off into a new line of business.
Some proactivity.
Yes. And I really love that. I loved both the interpersonal because I am very much an extrovert. But what I loved was I felt that I was really making a difference for them, that it was not
rather than just cleaning up a mess, you were helping prevent the mess.
I was helping prevent the mess. I mean, very often, now don't get me wrong, we would go in and do a deal. That deal wasn't necessarily cleaning up a mess. It might have been the deal for the new thing, but we would go in, we would do the deal, and then we would leave.
Yeah, transactional.
And yeah, I missed that feeling of getting to know the companies and making a difference. So first I tried going to actually a client for a few years in-house, because then you get to know the client again and you can be proactive. But what I discovered was I like being able to do this for more than one client at a time.
Yeah.
When you're in-house, you only have one client. So I opened a small practice where there are a couple other attorneys that assist, and we're focused on the same type of work, but my rate is about a third of what it would be if I was still in big law doing the same types of deals as I had done in big law.
Sorry to cut you off. Do you feel like you, obviously the price is a third of what it is. Do you feel like you offer any less of a service than what you were doing at the big law firm?
The only thing that's different is I don't have every specialty in-house. If somebody needs a tax lawyer, I'm referring them to a tax attorney outside of my firm.
Yeah.
But I've been doing this for 30 years. So I know who the great tax attorney is. I know who the great nonprofit specialty attorney is. I don't have a problem with who I'm referring them to because I have the connections. But when it comes to the small business startup kind of work that I'm doing now for solo and small businesses, it is all things that I do.
Yeah.
Right. I can start your LLC. I can do your services agreement, your website privacy policies. I can counsel you on staying out of trouble on the internet and IP. And for my larger clients, I am hired by them to be the technology and life sciences specialist for them. So for some companies, I am effectively like a fractional general counsel. I'm an external general counsel. These are companies probably in the $10 to $50 million range where they don't have an in-house counsel. So and they're a technology or a life sciences company. So I do all of that kind of work for them.
And when you say life sciences, can you explain what that means?
Sure. So I work with a research foundation, for example, where they are researching cures for a disease that has such a small patient population that the larger pharma companies don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So we're moving them towards clinical trials. So with them, it's research agreements, consulting agreements, clinical trial agreements. It's general advice and counseling related to that. I work with a software company, but they have software that they've developed that helps predict when somebody will stop taking a drug regime to help prevent something like AIDS from flaring up.
Wow.
So it's technology and life sciences. So for them, I am doing their intercompany agreements, their licenses, their licensing agreements with their potential clients as well. So it's life sciences and technology together.
So it's another selfish question.
Sure.
Why? in technology specifically, because that's an area of expertise, why, from a law perspective, do tech companies, why the registration in Delaware? Why a C corp over an LLC? What does that allow them to do? And I guess inhibitors are there by just being an LLC? I'm curious about that.
So in an LLC, as in a limited liability company, is usually used by smaller companies.
Right.
It is the easiest, the most effective to start, but in general, it's not as robust
Hmm.
as a C corporation when you're going to start to have multiple tiers and divisions and layers and tax pass-throughs. And that's when I get involved with people like you to handle it's often a tax question at that point. Right.
Right.
Which is going to give them the most advantageous tax perspective. And Delaware is terrific when it comes to C Corps. They have a well-established body of law. The judges are great. It's, in fact, the default, Delaware or New York is the
Yeah.
default law for most deals for multinational transactions.
Hmm.
For an LLC, it's, you file it in, from the small businesses, file it in the state that you're in so that you're going to be subject to the laws where you are operating, because
Yeah.
that's the most relevant.
Just kind of do. So take it for what it's worth, but it sounds like it almost depends on the situation and what the revenues are looking like and whether you bring on investors or not. That's kind of what I'm getting.
Yeah, it's more, how big are you going? How big are you? How many investors do you have? Do you want to have stockholders versus members? Right. That's another big difference, is stockholders. As an LLC, you're not really going to have public shareholders.
Yeah.
A C Corp, you can.
I asked that because I ask selfish questions because those are things that we're going through, and I like to get different perspectives and identify things that we could always do to improve. So I appreciate that. I think it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
But it's also a very big tax difference, right? So if you are an LLC and you are a sole member LLC, it's going to be taxed as a pass-through entity.
Yep.
You're not going to have separate corporate taxes,
Yeah.
which can be large, which you don't necessarily need to incur.
Yeah.
When you're an LLC. And even if you're a 2-member LLC, you can be elected to be taxed as a partnership, which is merely a K1, which again passes through your expenses right to your tax returns. That's why I'm an LLC. I don't need to deal with corporate taxes.
Well, it's another can that you get to open and deal with when you get to that point. Another thing that I want to kind of highlight with your story, as we've already highlighted a lot of the significance of your story. You're, if I understand right, a cancer survivor. Is that correct? Twice. I didn't know twice. I knew once.
The second one is actually new.
Oh, wow.
That was my gift last year.
I'll say it's an awesome gift. It's an awesome experience that I guess you get to go through, right? Whether you take that how you want it.
Awesome depends on the definition of awesome. Yeah. So the first time I had it was my graduation present from high school.
Oh, wow.
And that, stage 4, that certainly taught me about persevering in the face of less than favorable odds.
Yeah.
It also taught me about, you never know how much time you have, which is why at times I've worked less than full time to have a life along the way, or I've made sure to have a life along the way. So I love to travel. I've been to 55 countries before the pandemic, which is a good thing that I got most of my travel bug out. And I'm a competitive ballroom dancer. And I took a little bit of a sabbatical again before the pandemic. And for 2 years, I danced more than I was a lawyer. And people said, but how can you do this? I said, well, you never know how much time you have. You just don't know. And it was glorious. It was wonderful. And then the pandemic hit, and then people understood you never know how much time you have. And last year, now having the cancer when I was younger, the one thing it gave me, I think, is sort of a hidden superpower, is I know what to do when people I love and care about get sick. I know how to marshal resources. And because I've worked in life sciences, I know people who know people who know people. And I am not shy about picking up the phone and saying, this person got diagnosed with this. Who do we go? Who's the guru? Where do we go? And I'm often the first call or the second call when people get sick that are close to me, because I've learned how to separate the actions that need to happen from the emotions that need to happen,
Yeah.
which is much easier when it's not you.
I can imagine.
You can ask my fiance. As of last year, it was great, little less than ideal.
Yeah.
I come from a family where I was the first person, but like every single person
Thereafter has gotten it.
Yes, all different types.
Wow.
And I got it again, totally unrelated to the first. Well, totally different body part than the first time, but related to the first time because they've often discovered now that 20, 30, 40 years later, the treatment for cancer the first time gives you cancer a second time.
Oh, so you talked a little, I mean, I think getting cancer as a 17, 18-year-old has to give you a completely different outlook on life. You've got your entire life, for lack of a better term, you've got your entire life ahead of you and all these things to look forward to. Now that you're a little bit older, what has that done with your perspective of time with the second diagnosis?
I would say we're throwing a little bit more caution to the wind on the wedding.
Okay.
And it's a different wedding than we would have had. Instead of having the really, 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 really big wedding with everybody that lasts one day, we are having a wedding with probably a fifth or a quarter as many people, but we are doing it in a destination so that we have more time with the people, not just the day. When you have a wedding, if we had gotten married here, it probably would have been a guest list of 300 people.
Yeah.
My fiance has 31 first cousins. I worked in a law firm with 2,000 attorneys. We know lots of people. And I always have loved to entertain, so I have lots of friends. I'm an extrovert, I admit it. And he's got a really big circle of friends too. But when you have that many people, even if only 200 of them have shown up or 250, when you have that many people, you see each person for about a minute, right? You get to spend about a minute. And we decided that we'd rather go somewhere that means a lot to us. And you will see the geek in me come out. We both massively love Star Wars. I think that's one of the reasons he's marrying me is I own every Star Wars movie. And I'm a geek, I admit it. Don't look like one, do ballroom dancing, but I'm a complete geek. Have been I own every Star Wars and Marvel movie, really. It's the engineer in me. We're getting married at Disney World.
Yes.
We're getting married at Disney World.
Let's go.
And we're having our sort of bride and groom squad day party at Hollywood Studios so we can all go to the Star Wars part of the park.
That's awesome.
Yes. We have the reservation for Oga's Cantina. It's a bar in Star Wars that is like you are in the movie. And these rides it's extraordinary. So, but we have about 50 people going to the wedding, but we're taking everybody to Disney for a different day. We're having a normal wedding and then all these Disney pieces and Star Wars and Disney wrapped in. But, some people are staying a whole week with us. So the change is you never know how much time you have with the people you love. Yeah. With the people who matter most. So the people who are coming are our closest friends, and our closest people to us, that life is so busy. And then the pandemic where people didn't travel for a long time and didn't see each other, that you don't know how much time you have. So we want to spend the time with those people. So that's, I think, one of the biggest differences is that.
Does that perspective allow you as an advisor, in an advisor role, in a counsel role, have a different perspective when problems do arise with some of your clients? You approach those in a different way?
Yes. I understand, and something it's hard for business owners to understand, I think especially newer, no matter what age you are, is not all money is good money. There are clients that just aren't worth it. Yeah. And that when that you get that itch at the back of your neck, or you feel your antenna going up going, this client doesn't feel right. It may be not taking them in the first place, or even harder is letting them go. And I am more attuned now than even 10 years ago. So when I started my law practice, I'd already been a lawyer for 20 years. Yeah. And I didn't pay attention to the radar as much. Now I'm more cognizant of what client will not be worth it. But at the same point, I also protect myself a little more. I didn't always require a retainer, like a deposit.
Yeah.
I do now. Not a retainer as in you have to hire me for X number of months, but
Sure.
in upfront, because I had a client who was someone I'd known for 20 years, who was ex-military, who was honorable, and I did the work. They raved about the work. They used the work. They talked about the work in posts, gave me a glowing review, and then didn't pay me.
Mm,
And we were friends on social media, so I could see that they were going on great trips. They were doing lots of other
yeah.
things with money, but claiming that they couldn't pay me.
Yep.
So now I don't, I mean, the amount of retainer may vary depending on the nature of the work someone wants to bring or the volume of work. But now I pretty much make sure to cover that work up front. Now it sits in an escrow account, which I don't touch until I
Yeah.
complete the work and I send the invoice and then I transfer the money over. I don't take the money. I mean, the money is
Yeah.
sitting in it's called an interest on lawyer.
Reimbursable if services aren't
It is.
performed.
It's
Yeah.
actually sitting in what's called an interest on lawyer trust account. It's a thing.
Yeah.
And the money doesn't move to me until I perform the services. Now that's different than if someone actually wants to reserve my time guaranteed basis. So
Yeah.
I have some clients that want me to be guaranteed available to them X number of hours a week or a month.
Yeah.
Now in that case, they pay in advance.
Billable up front.
And it is billable up front because it is the opportunity cost of me not doing work for other people.
Yeah.
And that's something all consultants need to think about is when you're doing your business as a service provider, not just consultants, service provider, web designer, marketer, engineer, you have to think about the fact that not all payment structures work for all type of client arrangements.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I talk through. And I think at this point, honestly, what I'm doing is almost 50% business coaching with a lot of clients because they haven't seen as much as I have at this point. I've been both from the lawyer perspective and as a business owner. And it's finding the right payment structure and compensation structure for their particular type of work. And it's
Yeah.
different depending on what you do.
So not to overshadow the fact that your circumstances have given you a different perspective, but I also think that you need to give credit to just how long you've been in business, the experiences that you do have, and how that allows you to look in a different light. I know personally, I am quite a bit younger, and I believe in even it's been hard for me, up until the last year and a half, 2 years, for me to say no to different opportunities, different
It's
speaking
really
engagements, or
hard.
different client. It's extremely hard because when I started, as an entrepreneur, I thought, ooh, dollar sign, dollar sign, dollar sign. That person is worth X amount. This person is worth this amount, and I saw the opportunity. Whereas very similar story. We had a client a couple months ago who didn't owe us that much money, but we had been providing services and they had some outstanding invoices. And we finally just emailed them and I said, hey, look, you owe us X amount of money. I need this paid within this time period or we're going to discontinue our services. And we set up payment arrangements. And then you go on social media and see them buying the new machines and the new toys and going on this vacation or that vacation. And you think, why? How can you afford that? But you can't afford this accounting bill, And so then finally it just got to the point where I said, it's best that you go find someone else. So,
well, hopefully your contract let you do that. And a lot of times, and that's one of the things that I see a lot with small businesses is one, they will just sign whatever the client puts in front of them
yeah,
in the beginning because either they're afraid that if they don't sign exactly what the client puts in front of them, the client will walk,
yeah,
or they don't understand what the client puts in front of them and they don't want to hire a lawyer, so they sign.
yep,
Or they don't have their own template of their own and they don't realize like how much better it is for them
yeah,
if it's theirs because it protects them. And they very often sign things because if the client drafts it, they're not going to give the consultant or the service provider an easy out.
yeah. Yeah. Well, again, luckily for us, we do spend the money on good attorneys, and I feel like we do have the contracts in place. And in this situation, we did have the opportunity to end our contract with this individual during a certain time period, and so it worked out good for us,
Yeah.
So, but I think the other thing that shocks me too is how many business owners don't read the contracts or don't have contracts and don't have stops in place to make sure that they're kind of protected, if you will. I guess it kind of goes back to the comment that we were making earlier. I think they don't understand. They think it's expensive, and so they don't do it. But they don't realize that in the end, it costs so much more money to fix.
Yes. I mean, there are some things that we can fix later, but there are some things that are an unringable bell.
They snowball.
That you just can. Well, some things they literally cannot be fixed later.
Yeah.
So in the world of patents, if there is a public disclosure before you file the patent application, it is a bar to getting patent protection. You're out. You're out of luck. There are other things that we can fix. And yes, admittedly, contracts often get signed after the consultant has started performing work. It happens a lot, even for some of those big consulting accounting firms, because I've worked with almost all of the big four.
No one's perfect. No one's perfect.
No one's perfect. And the thing is I get it, because like I've seen all the mistakes. I've seen.
Oh yeah.
And but the big four accounting firms, they can take a little bit more risk. I'm being sarcastic. It's a lot more than somebody who's a startup.
But they can. But it's fair. They can.
It's fair. They can.
Yeah.
But when you're a startup, $5,000, losing $5,000 or $10,000 is huge, right?
Yeah.
Or, and the most common and one of the worst things I see is in the tech world, like people who like write apps, or they get their friends to help them, right?
Yeah.
For everybody who's listening, if you've got a friend who's helping and it's just on a handshake, you have a problem.
Yep.
Under intellectual property law, copyright, software, apps, algorithms, reports, drawings, artwork, sound, music, video. The copyright vests automatically with the author, the person who created it. No matter how much money you have paid someone to create it. If you do not have a written contract where the author assigns the work
ownership
to you, assigns the ownership, you don't own it at all. You could pay $1 million. Your friend worked on a handshake, created the best app, gave it to you. He owns it, not you. And when the investors come, or you want to sell the app, or someone buys it, his hand is going to be out.
Yeah.
And I know this because for 10 years at the big law firm, one of the things I did was be the person for the venture capitalists who would go into the target companies and dig. And dig and dig and dig to make
it was all there.
Yes. And I cannot tell you how many times the answer was, it wasn't all there. And then we have to fix it. And it might have cost you $100, $1,000 when you first started to get your friend to sign this for you.
But now there's value, so now it's worth $100,000, if not more.
Right. And the thing is, I know small businesses get caught all the time because I have seen big players, universities, who should know better, get caught by this. So so my free tip for everybody is, if you're working with somebody that they are creating things for you, you must get them to assign it to you in writing now. Or you need to do something called a nunc pro tunc assignment, which basically is the Latin for as it was. And you can, in fact, get someone to assign now the work they did for you before. Just pay them a small amount of money. But you need to get it in writing. Full stop. Don't. And every time on everything, put a copyright notice. Copyright, which is the C in a circle, the year, and the name, period. That's
there you go.
You become the copyright owner when you create it, but by putting that notice on, you provide literal notice to the world that it is yours, and nobody who then uses it without permission can claim they didn't know they were stealing it.
Interesting.
And it also can get you triple damages if you sue them.
Oh, there we go. That's where the money's at. There we go, Sharon. Great. That was a really good tip. But where else can people go? Tell us a little bit about the services that you perform. We don't need to get into prices, but if people are interested in working with you, Sharon, where can they go to either learn more? Where do you put out some advice? How can they get in touch with you and your team so that they can work with you guys?
Sure. So the first place is you can always go to our website, which is HT, like health tech biz, BIZ law.com. And you can find out all the different services there. You also can find us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, basically as at HTBiz Law. We have videos, text where, trust me, it's my marketing people get annoyed. It's more than 50%. Here's what you need to do.
Yeah.
And not buy this, right?
Yeah.
So we provide, you can sign up for a free newsletter. We do a monthly small business newsletter. We do a quarterly health and technology law update that are free. If you want a roadmap on the 6 must-haves to legally protect and grow your business, you can go to roadmap.htbizlaw.com. And we understand that small businesses do have price point issues, and we really want to be available and accessible with quality. So if you have a little more time than money and want to do a little DIY, we have templates for all the major contracts that you'll need. And it's not just, here's the template, goodbye. The templates include video walkthroughs where I literally walk through the template line by line, and they're annotated notes in the margin so that you can, it says what to change, why to change it, and how to customize it for your business and negotiation tips. If you have a little bit more money than time and you want us to do it for you, we offer flat fee packages because as a small business, knowing exactly how much something costs upfront is really helpful. So for the common documents, website documents, consulting agreements, independent contractor agreements, your LLC operating agreement, we will do those on a fixed fee basis. And we've got some bundles based on the most common things people ask for at the same time. And all of those include, upfront intake calls where we'll talk with you about where you are to make sure it's the right thing. And then training on how to use the templates in business yourself. So I joke that sometimes I kind of write myself out of a job, but it's true. I'm a 100% believer in every service provider, whatever service you're in, you should have your own template. Yep. And we set it up so that the body of the agreement, you're just going to use the exact same one every time for every client. And all you have to write is the statement of work or your description of what you're doing. And we give you a template for how to do that and guiding language on what should go in it. And we'll walk through and teach you how to change it so that whenever you enter new contracts, you can go to that pitch, whether it's a pitch in person, a pitch online, a video call. You can walk out of that meeting, go back to your computer, and within a couple hours, have the contract sitting in the potential client's hands. And you can do it fast. And clients understand what a real contract is, what a well-written contract is. And you can get it to them quick because, do you ever play Texas Hold'em?
I'm not a gambler.
Oh, well, I'm not a gambler either. I did play a little Texas Hold'em, but one thing my father taught me when I was 5 years old, because he taught me to play blackjack, I kid you not, when I was 5. My mother was always late. So while we were waiting, he would teach me cards. So I played blackjack, poker, all that as a kid. Whoever puts the money on the table first loses. But when it comes to contracts, whoever puts the form of the contract on the table first wins every time. Because you know exactly what's in it. You know there are no traps in it. You know that your IP rights are protected. Your right to get out is protected. Your right to know when your project is done, because there is no language that gives the client the ability to keep changing it on you. And you know how much you're going to get paid. And more importantly, or equally importantly, the client knows as well. Because the quickest way to get into a dispute with clients, no matter what industry you're in, is when you think you're doing X, but the client thinks they're getting Y. So having a clear contract, a clear description of what you're going to do is the key. And by having a template that you can flip quickly, you're also not going to be in the situation of the client sends you theirs because you didn't get them yours on time.
Yeah. Great advice. And for those listening, we will have all of Sharon's contact information in our show notes so that those who are listening can go to those show notes and access those or click on links to be able to access things like the free Legal Essentials Roadmap and and reach out to your team at HTBiz Law.
And I can include a link for our consult calendar. We'll do 15 or 20-minute consults with whoever has questions.
That would be awesome, and we can include that there.
And those are free.
Sharon, I just want to thank you again for hopping on. There was lots of great conversations, lots of great insight, lots of good little tidbits, and I hope those that are listening paid attention to that. So again, thank you for hopping on today. I appreciate it.
And thank you for having me. You've been a terrific host.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. For those listening, if you do have comments, please leave them. Let us know what we did good so that we can continue to do it. Let us know what we did bad so we can improve. And if you have anyone that you'd like to have on the show, let us know and we can reach out and get them on. Other than that, keep slacking off. I'm your host, Brady Slack. Have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.